Hello, this is the start of a hopefully exciting series where me and Dr. Jackson Crawford pick apart Beowulf one fit at a time. So we're probably going to do this over the course of about a year, maybe about one a month. We'll alternate between whose channel we put it on, and I would absolutely encourage people to go over to Jackson's channel on the off chance that you haven't already seen it. During the videos we'll be taking questions from our Patreon supporters, so thank you very much to those people for making it possible to do something like that. Just by way of introduction, Jackson has a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which focused on colour terms in Old Norse, and he's taught at several major universities in the US. And in the process of getting his degree, I know he has experience in a lot of other Indo-European languages, including Old English, which is very closely related to Old Norse. I'm coming at it from a different angle. I have a master's in archaeology from the University of Central Lancashire. I'm very interested in historical phonology and phonetics, so I've studied Old English mainly from the pronunciation angle. In the process of that, obviously, I've made an effort to learn syntax and grammar, although it is important to note that grammar is not my strong suit, and I've had grammar mistakes pointed out to me before, so apologies where I get the cases wrong and things in this video. Hopefully over the course of this series I'll learn to distinguish them a little bit better. But yeah, I do not pretend to be an expert in Old English from a syntactic angle. What we'll be reading is Beowulf, which is a text from around the year 1000, and this is part of the Noel Codex, or one of the two chunks of the Noel Codex. And this is a codex that changed hands a lot of times before it became accessible for academic study. So as far as I know, it's not completely clear where it was written or where it was composed, although the dialect that Beowulf is written in suggests that the Noel version was composed in the south of England because it's written in the West Saxon dialect. Although the dialect is a little bit all over the place in certain parts, so it may have been composed somewhere else, or it may have just made its way around the country as maybe an oral tradition. It's not clear whether it was composed around the time it was written down, or whether it was composed earlier. So if it was composed at a later date, near when it was written down, it makes reference to a lot of older characters, and there was probably a fairly widespread cultural awareness of these characters because they appear in Scandinavian literature as well. So if it was composed later, then there was probably an awareness that it was set a long time ago, and I think that does suggest some kind of oral tradition about these characters was being passed around, even if the exact story of Beowulf or the exact wording of Beowulf maybe was composed later. Another thing about it is that despite being written in English, it's entirely set in Scandinavia. So something I didn't mention to Jackson, which he's probably maybe thought about as well, is that the characters in the poem, or the potentially real people that some of these characters are based on, are more likely to have spoken something like Proto-Norse than they are to have spoken something like Old English, at least by my estimation. I suppose I don't know exactly the range where Proto-Norse is thought to have been spoken. So a couple of heads up about this beforehand. Firstly, as much as people say Old English had no strict word order, there were clear patterns in Old English word order, but in poetry those patterns kind of fall apart quite a lot. So you really have to pay attention to cases, the cases of nouns and things, to follow everything. So to break down one bit in particular, Nu je förboend merelidende, mine je hyras anfaldne je thought. Literally this is, now ye far dwellers, sea travellers, my here onefold thought. So this is quite common for the author to just describe things in two different ways, one after the other. And then you have this weird construction where the pronoun and the verb are just switched around from their normal word order. So instead of hear my thought, you have my here thought. And as far as I can tell, this is just because the author needs alliteration with mere. So the first stressed word in this half line has to start with a m sound. So the composer just switches these around because that makes them alliterate. And this isn't the way you'd normally express this in Old English outside of poetry, unless I've overlooked something, because again, I'm not a syntax person. So you get this playing around with word order to make things fit the poetic structure. Another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes the subject of a bit of the poem just doesn't get re-mentioned for ages. So it would be the equivalent in modern English of saying, Sarah got up in the morning and went to the shop, bought some bread from the shop, went home. That afternoon went to town and met up with her friend Jane, went home afterwards and did some work. So after a while it becomes unclear what the subject of a sentence is, and you kind of have to infer it somehow. One final thing I'll mention is that sometimes where you have a noun in the dative case, you would have to translate that into modern English as a preposition and then the noun. And it's not always clear which preposition you should use in the translation, because there was no preposition in the original manuscript. So you don't know whether something is on the sea or from the sea or over the sea or by the sea. And you kind of have to sometimes just put your own preposition in from context.
All right, so if this is the version that we're going to post, I guess you're posting the first one, right?
You could if you wanted, but I'm happy to start off.
I mean, I'm always divided about these things because, like, I feel like you have people watch your videos who don't subscribe to you, and then I have people who subscribe to me who don't watch my videos. I feel like your situation is better for the first installment of something like this.
I suppose so, yeah.
So couple things is if we're posting this for if this is the version we're recording, I think just to restate a couple things. Remember, different editors and translators disagree about what a line is. So check and see if your translation is about 3,000 lines long or about 6,000 lines long. The version I'm reading from, and I think you too, Simon, is is a shorter line count, right? We have half lines.
Yeah.
Okay. So do we want to just flip a coin to decide who starts with the prologue?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Are we doing one fit each, or are we doing like a few lines? I'd be happy to do a longer chunk each. Or
yeah, let's just do whole fit, I think.
That sounds good.
That's just notes. Those are appendix notes.
This is the first time, so we can be experimental this time with whether we're going to pause while we're reading to comment on something. I won't interrupt you to make a comment, but I think if you want to interrupt yourself to make a comment, of course, that's fine. We'll experiment with how that works.
Yeah, and of course, at the end of a fit, we can just make any comments we want, I suppose. Yeah. Or would you rather do that at the end?
I think we should do it fit by fit. And I think also if there's something that really stands out to you, go ahead and just stop reading and say, hey, I want to draw attention to this. I think that's fine. Okay. If that doesn't work well, we'll see. This is the first time we're doing it. So
yeah. And that's a good point in the chat. Should we take questions from people at the end, or sort of comb through and look for questions in the chat at the end of the thing? Or
let's try it. I would say try it fit by fit. Let's not try questions live as we read, because I'm not going to be able to keep track of the chat while you're reading or while I'm reading.
That's fair.
So like I'm going to lose track of the chat during reading. So let's try to keep it to fit by fit or maybe at the very end. We'll see. Let's try it fit by fit this time, I think.
Cool.
Do you have a coin?
I have a wallet next to me, so I'll probably put a coin in there somewhere. There
okay, otherwise I can flip a bookmark. I think it's the only thing I have.
I have a genuine British
okay.
coin. So what do you want to take? Heads, tails?
Heads.
Okay, so heads you start the fit, tails I start the prologue. Okay.
Yeah.
Heads. And that's
all right.
That's not just me fobbing it off on you.
Okay. Okay. Any other things we want to say? Do I sound okay? Is my
I think you sound okay to me. I can record a short introduction to Beowulf to attach to the start as well, just so people know kind of what it is. Can run it by you maybe.
Okay, or you record something like that. Yeah, I don't think that matters who does that. You want me to do my shock jock voice like we did in that one interview? Next, what? Wegardena in your dog, there's kenning him through you through enough. I'm not gonna subject y'all to that, although it could be a fun way to read it. All right, I'll start then. What we gardena in year dagum beods kuninga thrum jafruno, who tha adalingas ellen fremadon. Oft skylde skeving skedan a threatum monogam mathum meo de settler of tea. Eosse de erlas, sidan erest wer thea skeft funden. Hei thess frovre jabad, weax under woknum, werth mendum thach. Oth that him achwilch thara sittendra, over hron rada huran shoulder, gomban juldan. That was good kunne. Tham evera was after kjenner jeong en jerdum, thona God sende folket of frofre, fyren therve on jeat, that he drugon aldorleese langa huile. Him thess liefrea, wuldres weelden, worldare for jev, beo was breme, blad with a sprang, skyldes evera skedalandum in. Swa shel jeong gumma gode jawertjan, fromum theo giftum on færre berne. Dat hinna on ylde efter wunigen, vilje sidas thona week kumme. Leo de jalasten, lov dadum shel, in matha jahwera man jatheon. Him tha skyld jawat to jashapwille, fella hror feran on freyan ware. He hinne tho at baron to bremes farude, swassa jasidas, swa hesel bebad, tenden wordum wailed. Wine skyldinga lei of landfruma langa achter, there at hude stod. Ringet stebna, isi und utfus, adalingas fär. Aledon tha leofna theoden, berga Britan on bernum shippes, marna bebaste. There was magma fella, of fairweum, ratwa je ladded. Ne hyrde ich kymlikor chail je jirwan, hilde wapnamon heelde wadum, billumon burnum. Hemon bermele madma manigo. Tha hem mid shouldan on flores echt heoria witan. Na les he hena lessan lacum teodan. Theodis treonum, thona tha dudan the hena at frum skefte forth on sendon. Anna over ude umbor wessende. Tho juts hier him assetan seien yildene her over Heorot. Leton holm beran jevan on garsage. Him was jelmor seva mornen the mode. Menne kunnon sejantoth sode sela redende. Hallet under hevonen. Qua tham feste on fang.
That was a very, very good. I did like the rhythm of that. That was very nice.
Thanks. Was it? I am sure my like American Old Norse accent in Old English is annoying. I realize I have such a.
Oh no, go on.
Well, there's so two things as an Old Norse reader, frequent reader that come up that are slightly funny, maybe in pronouncing Old English. Well, maybe three. One is, Old Norse has no prefixes, so there are prefixes in Old English, and I always want to accent them, but I'm sure they weren't accented. So there's a few words that probably accented wrong. Another is I'm so used to weird, like late medieval or early modern Old Norse text where ev is printed as d between vowels, just because it's an allophone sort of. That there's places like I want to say fremadon, not fremadon, right? Because I'm just used to that printing convention. And then a third thing I was thinking is I'm so used to U mutation in Old Norse that something like in yer dagum, I want to say in yer dogum, because it's like A's don't belong before U, right? So
I think I have similar leakover effects on the rare occasions that I try and read Old Norse, because in Old English, voiceless, so fricatives like th are generally considered to be devoiced or voiceless at the end of a word, whereas in Old Norse, I think, isn't it just their voice if they're anywhere other than at the start of a word or something like that?
Yeah, I think you're right. So that I would be tempted to say weave, and it's actually weef,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
But then the plural is weevu. Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I think I remembered that sometimes, but that's a little bit
Oh, it's
American-y, a little bit Old Norsey.
it's very, to be honest, I think your pronunciation of the EA diphthongs is probably more correct for the time period than mine, because I always go ow. So there's sort of like a progression from Proto-Germanic for the long one. Is it the long one? Yeah, for the long one, there's a progression from Proto-Germanic ol, which probably started off very backed and finished up very backed, to Middle English air, and that probably went through various stages of being like ow, ow, air, and that seemed to be what you were doing, something more like air. And because this is written down at least so late, even though it might have been composed a few hundred years earlier, I think your pronunciation of those diphthongs might actually have been closer, probably was closer than mine to the actual historical ones. But I can't seem to change it in practice now that I'm
sure.
so. But yeah,
I mean, it's funny. I'm sure there is a lot of regional and time by time variation in how those were pronounced.
Yeah,
it's funny that in like high school or college, when I was first encountering Old English, I was sort of frustrated by these diphthongs. Like, this is seems like too many syllables. Like, why are these vowels broken into these weird, ea and ea things? And then I realized I'm totally hypocritical in being frustrated by that, because my modern English is defined by a lot of vowels like that, right? So, I'm not sure what I'm frustrated by.
Is that Southern US in particular? Because I know there's a lot of diphthongization of vowels in Southern.
Depending on the pace that I'm speaking at, a lot of my vowels can be broken in ways like that. And then I have like diphthongs that I don't normally have that are kind of replaced by these, like I still struggle with the oi diphthong. Like I just want to do a monophthong, right? I just want to say oh, but like when I do it, it usually comes out as like boy. Right?
Boy.
So, what do you think about this whacked? How do you translate that? Because so many different translators do so many different things with this. Low or listen, or what's your take on that?
My partner earlier today, because she knew I was going to be doing this, she gave an example of a translation she'd read, which I will put on screen because I don't know what I don't know who it was by, but it's fairly recent, where they translated "quat" as like "hey man" or "hey dude" or something like something like that, when they were using a sort of modern word choices. So like the point of it seems to have been obviously to draw attention to, this is where the story starts. Listen if you want to listen to the story. One thing I've thought about is that obviously we only have one codex in which Beowulf is preserved. Was "quat" always the word? Like, is that an ingrained of the story, or could people have used different? Could people have used "la" or something like that? And this is just the version that happened to get written down. But I think something like "listen" or something like that could be a good way of starting it.
It occurred to me, I joked about starting this with "next," but it's kind of
of the
maybe. Yeah, I mean, because you're sort of calling attention to whatever is coming, and maybe if this is being told in pieces, and maybe before this somebody was reciting the Wanderer or whatever, then it's like
the next,
right? Sunanday, Sunanday, Sunanday.
Like that.
So, all right. So next, should I just kind of quickly run through how I would translate this? Do you think that's a good part of this, or is that going to make this take way too long?
I reckon. I don't mind.
In for a penny, in for a pound, right? All right. So next, we heard of the valor, great deeds, good reputation of the Spear Danes in old days, of the kings of the Spear Danes in old days. Thrym is interesting because, of course, that's a name in the Poetic Edda, right? That's the Jotun who takes Thor's hammer. One thing that I think is kind of interesting is you get in line 3 or line 6 in our edition where half lines are full lines. We have how those nobles forwarded their courage. But I think with both Thrym and Ellen here, it's not necessarily the valor or the courage, but it's the story of their valor or their courage, right? So we kind of have some autonomy almost between the thing itself and the reputation of it. Or do you take it that way? Or
I hadn't thought about it in that much depth, but I think that makes sense because it's kind of like it's talking. There's a lot of talk about reputation throughout this throughout the prologue. So I think that does kind of make sense because there's all this stuff.
Oh yeah.
For example,
I mean,
where is it? So like Worldman is like that him Eichwich Sara Tendra or from Rade. So like each of the neighbors across the sea had to pay attention to him because of his reputation and all that kind of thing. So I think definitely it could be interpreted that way.
Oh, the prologue could be subtitled, Rep of the Shieldings.
Yeah.
So often shield shaving conquered mead halls. I'm going to say from many peoples. As you said, this is one of those cases where there's not a lot of prepositions. From many peoples, from the armies of enemies. He frightened earls, leaders. When first he became found destitute, when he was first found, he was destitute, I think is how I'd probably translate that. He awaited consolation for that. It's interesting how often Beeden and Yebeden are used like in a way that I wouldn't translate that naturally as await, but like he could expect or later he would get or something like that. Consolation for that.
I've kind of glossed it here as he found comfort in that, but that definitely isn't. That's definitely stretching the meaning of the word a little bit. But I think the implication is that he's going to, like, there will be comfort, there will be consolation.
I also want to draw attention to where I can the Norse parallels. Of course, obviously this is going to bore some people and thrill others, but Saxo, in his History of the Danes, of course, written in Latin and the 1200s in Denmark, talks about who he calls Skioldus. And there's not much in common between Saxo's Skioldus and Beowulf's shield. Skioldus is son of Lotharus and father of Gram. So the two generations in either end of him are totally differently named. He has a big fight with a bear without weapons, which is very Norse saga-ish, and there's nothing like that here, although there's a lot of bears in Beowulf. Really, the only thing he has in common with the Beowulf shield is that he's very accomplished while he's still young. Like, he has the bear fight when he's apparently not 15 yet. So it's kind of interesting.
I was going to ask about that parallel because I had, I know there's some characters slightly later, maybe even in the next fit, who have better parallels in Norse literature, I think.
Hrothgar, yeah. Hrothgar, and a lot of the people mentioned in his family do.
I'd heard Shield and Skilder compared, but I didn't know how well that held up. But
the Old Norse or Old Icelandic form is Skilder, but we don't have very much about him. We think that there was a Skildunga saga, a saga of the Shieldings, the Skildingar, but it's lost.
Okay.
So he grew on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, somebody suggests. I want to credit this person properly. Anticipate. Who was it? Barry Jacobson suggests anticipate as a possible translation, which I think is probably a good one.
Yeah, that is good because it includes. It's not just it's not passive waiting, right? There's that kind of active sense of hope or something that's along with it. Yeah. Honestly, Old Norse Vana can have very similar meanings, but not Biva.
Right.
So starting up again at line 8, or I guess that would be 15 if you have a edition printing half lines as lines. He grew under the clouds. He received honors. I like this compound. It's like honor pictures, at least from an Old Norse perspective. Until Achwilch, that's not like any, it's like every, right?
I would say like every, like each and every kind of thing.
So until every one of those sitting around over the ocean, the whale road, should hear or perhaps be obedient, right? Because Huron can have the sense of be obedient to, right? In Old English, like in Old Norse.
Yeah, like answer to.
Yeah, answer to, and then we supply an object him, pay tribute, Yildan Gomban. That was a good king. To him, an heir was begotten afterwards, young in the enclosures. God sent that one to the consolation of the people, for the consolation of the people, I think I would say. God, I think is still the subject here, perceived their extreme distress here in Therabin. That they formerly acted lordless a long time. Maybe acted isn't good for Drugon. They
I would have said something like suffered, but I can't
suffered.
I got that from, yeah.
It's interesting because like they haven't been lordless in the time that we've heard about because they've had the shield.
Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe there's some cultural, like you would be expected to know something else that hasn't been explicitly mentioned here if you were a reader at the time. Like maybe something about these people is known that they were leaderless for a bit, and it just doesn't have to be mentioned here because everyone knows.
Or maybe Beowulf is a sequel to something, and we're not. I mean, we know there are lots of stories about the shielding.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Life Lord, I'm still taking this as God, the ruler of wonder, gave glory to him, worldly glory to him, world Ara. Beo was famous. Now, this is interesting. Line 18 for full line editions, or what would that be? 35 for a half line edition. So in the manuscript, Shield's son is called Beowulf, right? But he's not Beowulf, right? He's not the Beowulf the poem's about.
He's not the main character.
Now I checked this, and the meter will allow Beowulf. It will also allow Beo, which a lot of editors, including Klaber, amend to. I think they're right to amend to Beo because Beo is the only acceptable metrical name the next time his name comes up, which is the first line of Fit 1. And so probably the scribe is just getting ahead of himself.
Like getting wires crossed kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a good
a lot of
didn't notice that about the meter. I didn't notice that about the meter. That's a very good observation.
Elena says, I'm occasionally able to look at the chat here. Elena says that Haney puts it as Beowulf. Ringler also puts it as Beowulf. I think that's like it's faithful to the manuscript, and it could be this is an earlier Beowulf, but I think that the metrical argument about the second time this name comes up suggests that it really is Beo, and the scribe just got ahead of himself. Okay, so his glory sprang widely, got out widely, ran around widely. Shield's heir in Scandinavia, I think this is the earliest occurrence in a Germanic language of the word that becomes Scandinavia, isn't it?
See, I've never known how to translate it. I know other people have translated it as like Northern Lands and stuff like that. But that's, yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense then. Shitty London.
It's because it's probably the part that becomes Skåne. It's Proto-Norse, I think, Skanthi. So that Norse is losing the thorn or ed, and English is losing the n. because the word Scandinavia is from probably Proto-Germanic Scanthinoia, which is then transliterated in Latin as Scandinavia. It means dangerous island.
I did
But the
not know.
Scanthin is then part of Skåne. Yeah, but I think it's neat.
That's very neat.
Am I making you, Simon, or anyone in the audience? If I'm running on too long and bloviating, let me know. But like I said, I figured in for a penny, in for a pound.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't mind how long the video ends up being. But of course, yeah, people in chat also have input. Although it seems like people are up for you to run on more. Is in their words.
All right. So, should a young man do good? With, I guess, great money gifts in his father's keeping, that men afterwards stand by him, willing companions when battle may come, that the people may, availed by the people, maybe. I guess you'll ask him being a participle describing him. That he will prosper with Theon, with praise deeds, loved Adam, among that man will prosper with praise deeds among every people, or among people everywhere. Yahweh, is that everywhere, or every?
Hang on, let me see how I've lost that. Yahweh. Yeah, I've put that as everywhere.
Okay. Shield then left him. I'm going to say at his fated hour, not to his fated hour. I love that compound for death. Yeshaphuila, right? The fated hours.
Yeah.
That's really rad. The very strong one. I'm going to say left again. I'm going to just take Yawat down to this line to go into the Lord's keeping. They bore him then to the ocean shore, the dear companions, as he himself ordered when he controlled words. That's also a pretty rad way of putting was alive. That friend of the shield.
Sorry, I was going to say you could read this whole thing without realizing he was dead.
Yeah.
It's just all very like poetically, but yeah, sorry.
No, it's true, but it's a long-standing thing. You know, so many languages use euphemisms about death and such. I'll mention something in line, 30, 60, if you have a half-line edition. So we finally see the name of the family, Shielding. Saxo mentions this himself in book 1 when he's talking about Shield. He says, ab ipso ceteri danorum reges communi quodam vocabolo Skildungi nuncu parentur. So from this, his prowess, because Gildas is such a badass, the rest of the kings of the Danes are now called by the common name the Skildings. So Saxo also mentions that. Okay. So this friend of the Shieldings, dear lord of the land, had it a long time. There stood at the harbor a ringed prow. So boat. I don't know what the ring part means specifically.
No, I wasn't sure about that. Although it's clearly ringed.
Yeah, and then the ship is icy and eager to go out. Really gives you a mental image. I know some translators and editors take the icy as a way of saying irony, like covered in iron. I don't know if it's necessary to go that far. I feel like the straight, just icy, really gives you a neat mental image. The nobleman's vessel. They laid the dear lord, the dear Theoden. Right, so there's a cool
Yeah, I like
Tolkien word.
a cool, just because I like drawing little cognate comparisons. So this word "theod" is the same root as we find in the German word "Deutsch," meaning like relating to the people. Well, I mean that's not how most German speakers understand it now, but yeah. So it's like the idea being like the people, the group. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the dear Theoden, distributor of rings in the embrace of the ship, the great one by the mast. There was a great amount of treasures from far away, like loaded with ornaments.
Mhm.
I never heard of a more splendidly decorated keel with war weapons and battle clothes, with swords and armors. They lay in Shield's embrace, or lap, I guess, many treasures, which should with him depart far away into the flood's keeping, right? Would you say that?
I would say so.
They did not at all equip him with lesser gifts. Am I taking lesson right there?
See, I gave it as fewer, but it could
Fewer.
It could be either, couldn't it? So it's like they hadn't.
What could it? Okay, so either way, I mean, like the message is clear.
They hadn't done any worse. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting. It could be count or non-count. Let's see, the Theodistranum, is that the distributor for the people? Is this him?
Hang on, what have I written for that? Theodistranum. I've written.
Oh, it's the treasure.
Like people wealths or people treasures.
Yeah.
And then, so like to the.
So no lesser gifts or no fewer gifts, no lesser people treasures, national treasures probably. When they did, the ones who at the beginning sent him forth alone, being a child, Umbor Wessenda, over the waves.
So if I'm not wrong, this is kind of again implying something that we haven't seen yet from his earlier life. Do you think when he was a child he was sent over the waves or something like that, or maybe I've totally.
Well, back at line 7 or 13, it says he was found destitute.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So I think it's lightities, right? Like they didn't do any worse than the people who sent him out with nothing, right?
Yeah,
because there's so much of that litotic stuff in Beowulf. Then yet they. Sorry, what do you say? They set him, or they set a golden standard high over his head. They let the sea bear him, gave him to the ocean, possibly like the Gar field, Gar's edge, Gar's borders. There was a sad mind for them.
I think Gar sedge is like, so it's broken down into Gar sedge normally, so like spear, man. Actually, come to think of it, I think I've only read that in one place, so I don't know if that's the normal. I shouldn't have said normally, but so the idea being maybe that there's some mythical figure or something with a spear that represents the sea. But although Gar's edge maybe makes more sense, I don't know actually. Sorry, Ash, interrupting that.
No, editors print this with a long A. I'm not sure it has to be long for the meter. Like I don't know if the word gar for the fish is attested, but Luke says
like spear.
Luke says
spearman.
Or there's the fish, because like they're not sending him to a man, they're sending him to the ocean, right?
Yeah.
Niles, Luke says that Jack Niles had suggested Garce as a metonymy for grass, so it's the grass edge, maybe to another ocean, another shore. Yeah, so actually that's a little bit of a mystery. There was a sad mind for them in YC Homer 7, morning mood. Men did not know how to tell the truth. The happy advising men under the heavens who received that burden, that almost like loot.
Yeah, I think that's you could read that in a couple of ways. You could read it as like the more kind of mundane way of nobody knows where the ship went, it must have just got beached somewhere. Or you could read it in the kind of because there are other places where it obviously references heathen practices and kind of casts them in a kind of not necessarily disapproving light, but in a kind of we're Christians, we don't do that anymore, but they did at that time. You could read that line as a kind of who knows whether it was taken to God or whether it went to sort of whether this corpse which spiritual direction the corpse went in. Nobody can honestly say that they know, would be I don't know. There's a few ways it could be read. Am I making sense, or I can try and word that differently?
No, I mean, it bears a certain mystery, but I think that the mystery befits it. You can take it how you want. I take it as part of the kind of overall litotic phrasing of Beowulf. No one knows. I mean, it's a semi-obvious statement, but I like the almost, and I don't think this is accidental on his part, Tolkienian feeling of who's on the other side, who's going to pick this up. Yeah,
I like that very much.
All right, so that's fit or not fit one. That's the prologue. Are there comments, questions? I see Gavin says, could it be a metaphor for still talking about Garce Edge? Could it be a metaphor for a point of land, like a spear point of land, an edge? Maybe. I struggle so much with knowing what's meant here and wondering if there's something wrong.
Like in the way it's been written up.
Yeah, because I mean, exactly like you said, if you just showed me Garcedge or Old Norse Gersegr, I would say, yeah, that's like spearman, right?
Yeah.
But in context, I have no idea what to make of that here, right? Like they gave him, because they're giving him, it says multiple times, he's over Uda, right? Let's on Holmberran.
There's
like
clearly
all of these,
the sea, yeah.
Yeah, all of these objects are the sea. So it's just like, why is there some random dude here? And it actually makes the end of the prologue less interesting if there's some sense that there's a person that's being sent to, because it's not. They don't know where they're sending him.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So already we're in the midst of mystery.
I'm glad that I'm not the only one who's mystified by this. Well, obviously I'm not, but yeah.
I spent my entire day mystified.
What, today?
I spend all days mystified.
All day, every day.
All day.
Okay, shall I? So, fit one. Thowas on Borgum, Beowulf or Beo, Schillinga, Leof Leodkinning, Longestrage, Folkum Jefraje. Fader Ellor Hwarf, Aldor of Aarde. That him eft on walk, how halvdene, how venden liefde, Gammo van trail, Vader Schillingas. Sam fewer baurn, in world walkun,
Welda Raswan, Hroðgar and Hroðgar and Halga til. Hyrde ich that Elon Quain Ongen Theoes was, how the Shilvinges, how sie bette. Þá was Hroðgare Heresped given, vies Welfmind, that him his Winnemagas, Jeurne hyrdon. Og that seu Jehuth, Jewels, Marodricht Mitchell. Him on Maud Bearn is how I'm reading that. That Haureched heart on Walden. Meduarn, Mitchell. Menuerchan, sånne Yldo Barn, Avrie Flonon. An thar on innan, Aljedalon, Jongum and Aldum, swilch him Godsalde, Shopal, ut on Folkskade, and Felrum Gumena. Tha ich wide Jefrein, Werkjebannan, Manire Maide, Jon Sisne Middan Yard, Folkstede Flatwan. Him on Firste Jelomp, Adre mit Ildum, that it warth au jauro, hauarne mast. Shop him helpnaman, sethe his wordes je wild wide havde. He belt ne alech, I'm going to read that as alech rather than alech, bauras dalde, sink at simle. Sille libade, hauch and hornjal. How the Wilma bad, ladan lies, ne was hit lenge tha jen. That se edgehete, adum swelran, after wow neither, waknon shoulder. Tha se ellen gast, alvodliche thrage je tholde, sethe in thistrum bad, that he dohora, je farm draum, je hyrde. Lludne in howle, thar was harpan sway, swottle song shoppes. Saide sethe kude, frumschau fira, feuran rekkan, quath thatse aun michtiga eurdan worte. Wite belcht ne wang, swa water bebugeth, je sette sieredi, sunnan and monan, leuman to leuchte landbuendum. And je fratwade foldan shoutas, leumum and lauvum, lief auk je shelp kinna, je whilchum thare the quicke whirvath. Swa tha drichtguman, draumum livdon audliche, og that an ongan firene freman, found on helle. Was se grimma gast Grendel haten, Mare markstappa, sethe moras held, fen and fasten. Fivel kynnes aard, one sally where, wardo de huile, siddan him shippend, forskriven havde. In keines kynne, von qualmjurak, eche drichten thaste he abelslov, neje fauch he thare fachte, ak he hinne feur forrak, metod for thi mane, man kynne fram. Sanon untydras, alle om wokon, eutenas and ylve and orknaas swilche gigantas. Tha vis gode wunnon, lange thrage, him Thaslown for Riald. There we are. Apologies for stopping and starting. What I've done is I've written up an IPA transcription, and I've used the normal A on a keyboard to represent what in Old English spelling would be AE, like the ash symbol, and I've used the IPA back A to represent the back A. And whenever I read the normal A, because in Old English orthography that would represent the back A, I try and pronounce it as the back A, so I end up mixing up the two. So I've tried to correct myself wherever I, but yeah, I'll edit that in the edit to make it flow a bit better. But yeah, sorry about that.
We definitely have different Old English accents.
I think so. Thank you very much, Kate Palmer. But yeah, so we could go through that. So then was in Borgum, in like boroughs, in like land boroughs, I would translate that as. Bel, again, this character that some people write as Beowulf, but some people write as Bel, lived, who is the son of Skildinga, who died in the prologue. Known and famous to the people for a long time. If there's anything you disagree on, Jackson, by all means jump in. Fader Elorwarf, his father having gone elsewhere, again a euphemism for dying.
Yeah,
Elder of the earth. So I like just saying that dead people have gone elsewhere.
Here's a weird thing to mention. I was inspired by the way that Beowulf talks about someone who's died having gone far away, right? You see this sort of thing, and it actually works its way into the dedication of my first book, where I mentioned two who have gone far away. It's a weird kind of oblique shout out to the way that Beowulf talks about this, which to me is like it's as much as it's kind of a euphemism, it's emotional, you know. It's because I mean, what is further away than wherever they are, right?
Yeah. Was that deliberate, or did you kind of realize it after you'd done it?
Oh no, it was perfectly deliberate.
Okay.
So he's Leof and Jafraya, right? So I was taking that as like he's their dear king, and their famous king. Did you take that as more like known? Is that what I heard?
Hang on, let me scroll. Yeah, I took it as so longithrage, to a long age, or for a long time, people. I said I've got known / famous in my little gloss, like people were aware of him kind of thing, although famous is probably better.
Okay, because I was, again, I'm always kind of looking at things through a little bit of a Scandinavian lens. For Leof, I was thinking Beowulf, right, like deer, and Jafraya, it's Old Norse Frager. It's not too different. Anyway, not trying to interrupt you.
I think like dear, like beloved is a good way of translating Leof. How about translating?
And then we get to, it's also kind of interesting how they talk about people being born, not to mention just dying.
Yeah, it's like so how would I do this literally? That him eft on walk, until him dative, so until to him then woke up is, I suppose, one way of putting that. High Halfdane, who ruled for the whole time that he lived. I put as that held Thenden lived, old and sort of battle wizened, battle fierce, glad Schildings. So until High Halfdane, his son, was born to him, who ruled the glad Schildings for his whole life. old and battle fierce is how I put that into kind of normal English. To him, Halfdane, I assume, the leader of legions, 4 children in a row were born into the world. So there's this word forthierimed, which is like one after another in a row, is how I've got that. Heorot and Hrothgar and Holga. So these are the names of the children. And Till, I think, means like good, competent.
Or is that also? I think it's just 2, right? Because Till can have that sense.
It can, yeah.
In Old English, can't it?
That's true. I think I've always got the impression that was loaned from.
Oh, you know what? This could be too much of my Scandinavian influence, because Till is the preposition to, and also can be too. You're probably right, because this is probably a lot like, and this is. You see this actually in a lot of old Indo-European languages, where if you have a sequence of 3, it's the 3rd one that will have an adjective on it.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
So, yeah, like, it's something you see in Homer, right? So, like, and then came, Ajax and Agamemnon and cunning-minded Odysseus, right? So I think that's actually kind of what's going on here. You're probably right that it's good, and it's too much of my Scandinavian frame, taking it as 2 are also.
So I can't remember where, but I have seen Till used for 2. I'd always assumed it was an Old Norse loan word, because it has worked its way into certain English and Scots dialects. But I'm sure I've seen that in Old English. I suppose it's possible it's just a native word that only survived in some dialects, but yeah. And I think there are dialectal forms kind of littered throughout Beowulf. So definitely a possibility.
By the way, here's an interesting question. So Gavin, I see in the chat, says, why does Kleber drop Yrsa on line 62, or I guess that would be 123 or 4? Blake says he is here in the text here, Yrsa in the translation. So the manuscript is nothing. The manuscript goes here to itch that was Onelan Quain.
Yeah, I'm working from the. Hang on, let me actually get the Harrison and Sharp one up.
Because Yrsa is coming in from that is supplied by a lot of editors and translators based on the Norse saga of Rolf Krake. Because all these names are right there in Rolf Saga Krake. And the only version I have of it here is my fancy box set version. It's pretty interesting what you see there. You've got the Schildings. The family tree is pretty different. And the first, I want to say like 14 chapters of Rolf Saga Krake concern actually Hrothgar and his brother Helgi. Hrothgar is Old Norse Hroar, Helga is Old Norse Helgi. Their story is quite different. They're the sons of Halfdan, which also is right here, right? Halfdan. But in the Norse saga, Halfdan has a brother Frodi who deposes Halfdan and then tries to kill his sons. The sons eventually burn him down in his hall. Helgi takes over. Helgi is then the father of Hrolf, the king in Rolf Saga Krake. And then, weirdly enough, in the Norse saga, Hrothgar becomes a king in England. That's a funny, weird little
I see.
Yeah, but yeah, Yrsa is a character in Rolf Saga Krake, and I think that's why her name gets supplied here. But I haven't looked at the manuscript face to face, but from how I understand the apparatus in Kleber, that in fact is just there is nothing. It's just here to itch that was Onelan Quain. So if there was a name there, and there could have been, it's not there in the manuscript, and people are just supplying names.
Yeah, that seemed like a bit of a throwaway, perhaps, to something that other readers would know about that maybe doesn't have to be understood in order to understand the rest of it. But I just translated. I think I translated what I found in the Harrison and Sharp thing. What was that? The best I could come up with was, I heard that Elon Queen Elon. No, sorry. I heard that Elon was queen of Ongentheow, which I wasn't able to work out what that meant. The bedfellow of War Shilbing. But I have no idea if that makes sense, and that it seems like that's probably based on an incomplete line.
But Ongentheow isn't mentioned here either, right? It's just Onella. Again, in the manuscript. I'm
trying to see if I have actually got. Oh yeah, I have got that from Harrison, but it's possible they've added that.
Dev and Elena ask whether it's damage or whether there's it just wasn't written in. Again, if I understand the apparatus to Quaver correctly, it was just never written in. There's no gap between the words.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, there was a lot of interruption to talk about the
oh no, it's an interesting line. So Tharwas Frost come. Then I would say Hrothgar had success in war, or he was kind of given success in war, as a result of which his loving kinsman happily sort of tended to him. So like followed him, maybe tended to him, until the Beowulf, which so that generally means youth. So it could be like the young population, or specifically, I've seen some people translate it as the young warriors. I don't know if that's necessarily implied by Beowulf, but until the youth grew into a great war band. Him on Maud Bearn, to him it occurred in his mind, or it occurred in his heart to him, that he wanted to command or like commission a big hall to be built, a big mead hall, which would be remembered by the sons and the descendants of his men. So he wants to create a big famous hall. And within the hall, he wants to share with everyone, young and old, that those things that God gave to him, except Folkskare, so like the common shared land, the people land, and Feldum Gumina, the lives of men.
So did you skip 2 lines, or are they not in Harrison and Shaw?
Oh, I know. Hang on.
I didn't hear what you did with Meadow, Aaron, Mitchell, Men, Yewircheon, Fauna, Hilda, Baron, Aver,
What have I done?
So it's what I see is line 69 and 70.
So, okay, so Men Yewircheon, was that one of them?
Yeah.
I've got that as, I may have skipped those over. So I've got that as built by men. Sånne Ylderbau Baun Avri Fronon. That's what I've got as which men's sons always have sort of heard of. So a hall that is that.
Do you have a line, what's part of line 69 for me, Meadow, Aaron, Mitchell?
Oh, I have. Oh yeah, no, I think. Oh, okay. So would that be like mead, a great mead hall, a big mead hall?
Yeah, It's literally like mead house because the Aaron is the Ran in Old Norse. It's part of Ransak, right? Search the house.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very interesting.
But I was just curious what you made of this because it's grammatically kind of weird, right? So he wanted to order that hall. I take men as an accusative plural there still. He wanted to order men to make the meadow Aaron, right? The mead house.
Mm.
But then and Claver and Vulcan and Niles and their commentary on Claver call attention to it feels like there should be a comparative here, right? Mitchell, because it looks like Mitchell Fauna, like big than. It looks like it should be, Ma or something, right? Bigger than.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So, like bigger than men's children, Ildo Bairn ever heard of, right? Abra Yafrunon.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed
Anyway.
that.
Yeah, so
Very
like
good.
it seems like there should be a comparative there, and I think that's a pretty good argument for like, yeah, sometimes there's errors here.
Yeah, I think there definitely are. I suppose it's kind of, yeah. There's, as far as I know, almost no evidence as to why the person that wrote this wrote it. Whether they had any kind of vested interest in preserving it, I suppose they kind of must have had. But yeah, I hadn't noticed that at all. That I think that takes an avid translator's eye to notice a thing like that. Yeah, I should have picked up on that.
Oh, it's easy to just have have your eye skip over something.
I can't remember where it was. So within the hall, he wanted to share with everyone, young and old, the things that God gave to him, except people like common land and people's lives, men's lives. Then, so Thar ich wieder Yefrain, I've got that as then I've heard it said. I've widely heard. Does it say ich in your copy?
Da ich wieder Yefrain
Okay, cool.
Yabana. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got that as from the author's perspective. Maybe then I've heard it said that many people throughout this Middle Earth, this Mid-Donyard, were ordered to work on this building or work on sort of building and decorating this hall of the people. So I widely heard work ordered, many people, dative. Is that, where have I got that? Throughout this Middle Earth, folk hall decorate. So the use of Mid-Donyard, I think, has been read into a lot. Do you think this implies a world that belongs to a kind of multi-world system, or do you think this is just a kind of offhand way of referring to the world, like the land maybe between the sea and the sky or something like that?
I suspect for the most part, it's just poetic convention. I mean, it gets you the nice alliteration of M. Right. Actually, most of the time you see it in Old Norse, I think it's just a poetic convention.
Okay.
I wouldn't read anything too cosmic out of this, although before long we get some cosmic stuff. So maybe he's foreshadowing that a little bit.
So in time, it happened adre mit bildum, which I've got as quite quickly, thanks to the men. So quickly because of the men. It was all finished. This greatest hall. He gave it the name Heorot, which here is spelt Heorot, but later is spelt Heorot. This is, I think, usually given as meaning like heart, like a male deer. You could interpret it as meaning heart like the organ, but I think there's evidence from the what do you call it, the Sutton Hoo burial, that a male deer might have been some kind of symbol of unity or something like that, or some kind of military
And
symbol.
And I noticed just a few lines later that the hall is horn, yeah, right?
Yeah, that's
So-
interesting. I
So
had that as well. I'll read to it. So he built near Arlech. He boasted without lie. So he boasted no lie. Shared out rings, gave out rings, and treasures at Sumla at his feasts. And then the hall, like you say, the hall towered high and covered in horns, hornial. That's how I've translated that. I'm not sure if maybe.
I think it's, yeah, I think it's good, and I think that's a good indication that it is the, what I would call a buck, right? It's basically it's buck hall, right?
Oh, I completely misinterpreted the word horn. I was imagining like the musical instrument. That's okay. That's yeah.
Well, I mean, that's how there's other ways you could take it, like as Gavin, I see in the chat, points out, you could take it as gabled or something like that. But I mean, where I come from, there's a lot of horns used as decorations, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is just horns, because it would kind of play into the name.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense than what I had in my head. I was really confused. I thought they just glued musical instruments all over.
I don't know. I guess it could be
I think
two, although
yours
we're not very far from a musical instrument being mentioned.
That's true. So covered in horns or horn gabled, as you suggested, as someone in the chat suggested, and it waited for the flames of war, or the hateful flames. Ne was hit lenge thar yen, not was it belonging then yet. So, but it wasn't the right time for that yet. That the sword hatred of Arthum Sweldan, which I've got from Bosworth Toller, son-in-law and father-in-law, all in one word, or like son-in-law, father-in-law, must awaken. Hang on, what have I've missed something out there? Oh yeah, from like deadly hatred must awaken.
And that could be a reference to all of this fighting among the family that we read about in the saga, but obviously it's not a very detailed reference to it.
Yeah, again, it could be one of those things that everyone was aware of that story anyway, so it didn't need explicitly saying.
Yeah, it's interesting because the hall is not called Heorot or anything. I don't think it's given a name, as I recall, in the Old Norse saga. Of course, it's a late saga. It's based on early material, but it's a late saga. But it's interesting that hall, which belongs to the famous hall in that saga, belongs to Hrothgar's uncle, and he does burn it down. So when it says that it's awaiting hostile flame, right? Hail the Wilma, whatever. That's it's interesting that it kind of echoes that story without that story actually happening.
That context has put it in a new light for me. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. This is one of the benefits of reading it as two people with different angles on it, I suppose. So then the powerful ghast like spirit or monster that lived in gloom and darkness impatiently endured time, and that he heard happiness or celebration every day. So there's this monster living in the gloom that's it's implied really doesn't like the sounds of people celebrating, and he's kind of sitting there enduring these sounds from this hall in the distance. Loud in the hall there was the harmony of harps, and Swottle sung Shoppis, the sweet song of the poets or singers. Would you say that a shop was like maybe the Old English, the closest Old English equivalent to something like a skald in Old Norse, maybe, or do you think there's not enough
I
evidence?
think Old Norse scald has such a specific sense,
Okay.
with the the meters being used being so particular, but it's not bad for this. I mean, but I think Bard is pretty okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, I suppose, because we don't have a sort of scholarly idea of kind of shop poetry in the same way that we have of skaldic poetry as a rigid kind of thing.
Well, I guess this is shop poetry, right?
Well, I suppose so. Yeah.
And of course, we're about to get kind of an independent little poem within this, which you could envision being the work of that shop.
Yeah. So Saida se fecuse, the ones spoke the ones which knew how, which were able. So presumably that means the poets who are good with putting words together. Told about the origin of man and about how the Almighty One created earth, wrought earth. And again, well, like Jackson says, this seems to be sort of diving into that poem, that beautiful field surrounded by water, and created the triumphant sun and moon as so Leomantor Leorte. I've translated this as light because it seems like it's, as far as I can see, it's two words, both kind of meaning light. So lights as lights, maybe lights as lanterns or something like that, for the people living on the land.
I think you're right. Both of those roots for light exist in Old Norse too.
Oh, cool.
Luke, I think when he says singular, is probably pointing to you said like the victorious sun and moon. I think it may be the victorious one set the sun and moon, like God is the victorious one.
Mm.
Oh, he means the show, the single one who knew said.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's, yes, that's a good. I think that.
Yeah.
I think you're right, actually.
I think it's what Luke and Matt are pointing to.
That's a good point. I glossed that as plural. That's a good point. So said that the one that was able to, the one that knew how. That's a very good point.
Well, sometimes I get so fearful because sometimes when I've pointed out your minor missteps, you've just gone into these rages. I remember we were playing, you and Travis and Ronnie, Ari and I were playing that game where you guess what percentage of people do whatever, right? Like what percentage of people dream about their dog or something like that, and you got it way wrong, and you flew off the handle.
Flew off the handle. I created personalized insults for every single person in the call. They were the most cutting, horrible insults of them all.
Yeah, we're reluctant to have you back after that.
I haven't actually come back since that.
You should. I think Ronnie is going to be back this Thursday.
I'll try my best then. I think I should be around more. Yeah, I don't think I've got anything major on Friday. But yeah, no worries, Luke. It wasn't pedantic at all. It was a very good point. They decorated or adorned the corners of earth with limbs and leaves, or limbs. Is that the best translation for that?
I think it's limbs, yeah.
And he created every species which is alive and moving. Life also formed kinds or species. Each that which alive moves is how I've glossed that in.
Yeah, I think it's slightly redundant, but like each one, or like maybe moves with life.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know if quick is quick a noun in English ever?
I don't know. I interpreted it as like an adverb, but I could be wrong actually.
Oh, like moves livingly.
Moves quickly, living. Yeah, well, quick, but yeah, livelily.
Yeah.
So the Lord's men lived happily in their joys, until one started to do crimes. A fiend in hell found on hell there. This horrible monster was called Grendel, and if I've done a video recently-ish on the verb hartan, which I'll plug here. But yeah, so that was the Grimma Gast Grendel harten, the one who walks around the boundaries. So maybe there's like land boundaries, or the boundaries of where the people's land ends and the wilderness begins. Maybe it doesn't specify that though. That which holds or held the moors, the fens, and strongholds. Well, those are both singular, so fen and stronghold. Ambiguous kind of what it means by stronghold. I don't know if that just means he makes a den for himself and then doesn't let anyone near it, or if there's an actual sort of man-made stronghold that he's occupies that's been abandoned or something like that. But yeah, this wretched. Oh, go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, I almost feel like there's a comma there, right? Like it's just renaming the fens. They're his fastnesses.
Yeah. It's like the fens are his strongholds, kind of thing. This wretched where, which I've translated as man, but you could quibble with whether he's a man or not. But I would say it sometimes treats him almost as if he's a person, which
That's
I suppose.
It's weird because it seems to be setting him up as kind of inhuman, but then it uses these very human words.
Yeah. So I suppose there's a lot of ambiguity in the same way that different words for kind of monstery things overlap a lot. So I think at one point I'll point that out when I come to it. But like, so for example, Gast could mean ghost, or Gast, it could mean, spirit, or it could mean, I've just translated it as monster here because ghost doesn't seem to be applicable, but maybe it was, I don't know. But yeah, so this wretched man had ruled the monster's land. So maybe this is related to some idea that the kind of wilderness is where monsters live. Although maybe that's reading a bit too much into it. For some time since the creator, God presumably, had condemned him. And then it goes into this interesting little kind of tying it in with Christian imagery. So I've translated this as, with the kin of Cain, as in Cain and Abel, the eternal Lord avenged the killing whereby Cain slew Abel. He didn't enjoy this feud, so God didn't like that he had to do this, but in the same way, he banished Grendel far away from mankind, a fate for the wicked. So that's obviously me adding a lot in to make it a bit clearer. That's how I read it. I think
you're right. The kind of color thing I wonder about there is, did he banish him far away or rack Feor, or is Feor temporal? He banished him a long time ago. Because sometimes he seems to use Feor and related words temporarily. So I was wondering, like, oh, that's interesting. Like, it works either way, right? But I thought it was kind of an interesting, like, neat minor ambiguity.
Yeah, that's a good point. I suppose it's just another example of the kinds of things that, like, different languages have different things as compulsory to express. So in the same way, like, as the preposition thing, they, to or of, well, I suppose of would be genitive, but like to, from. And
I see Deb in the chat says temporal because Grendel's close enough to hear the celebration, which is an interesting note.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Unless he's like in the CG movie from like 2008, and he's enormous ears.
I've only seen clips from that film, but I think whenever I ask people, well, the 2 times I've asked people who've seen it, they can't remember if it's CG because apparently the CG is so kind of weirdly.
It's kind of uncanny valley.
Yeah.
There is a riff track for it, so that's worth
Yeah,
checking out.
Okay, I will certainly check that out. I'd probably I'll watch it after we finish doing this, whether never in a year or 2 years that ends up happening. And
Mark points out, isn't the banished far away referring to Cain? And actually that's probably more accurate anyway.
Yeah,
so actually then the far away and the long ago still is ambiguous.
Still holds, yeah.
Anyway, that's drawing a lot on a 4-letter word.
From there,
but
all gods. I've borrowed this translation from an online one, which I'll reference on screen because I wouldn't know how to translate it myself. But un tidras, I have translated as unspeakable offspring, which I've taken from someone else. All gods' unspeakable offspring awoke. Here's the bit where we have to translate eltinos.
Yeah.
I've just translated it as etins, which I suppose is kind of me doing that thing I talked about earlier where I use an archaic word that nobody uses, but I suppose you could say monsters. What I didn't do is translate it as giants, partly because you've made the good point that kind of implies something about them which isn't explicated. Eltinos are not necessarily the same as Jotnar in Old Norse, although the words are cognate with each other. So Jotun, which is usually translated as giant in Old Norse, this is the same word as Eldin, although it doesn't necessarily mean exactly the same thing. Another reason I haven't translated as giants is because the word giants comes straight afterwards, gigantos,
yeah.
which almost certainly means giants. Ylve is related to, is the ancestor of the modern English word elf, or Ylf is the ancestor of elf. Alaric Hall has a very big, it might even be his PhD dissertation, I can't remember, but a very nice delving into all the references to elves in Old English literature and how they might have been viewed. So there's all these sort of complicated things about they might have been involved in medical problems and stuff like that.
It's a very good dissertation.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I think, as a lot of PhD dissertations are, I think it's available online. Orknaus, how have I translated that? I suppose I think I've just translated that as monsters.
Orcs.
It's tempting to translate it as orcs. But yeah, so from there, all gods' unspeakable offspring awoke, monsters, etins, whatever, and elves and monsters and giants. Then remained with God for a long time, and Hehimthas Laun Foriald, he paid them their reward for that. So I don't know if this means that all of the monsters have kind of helped God banish Grendel, and he's given them their reward. I found that a bit hard to. There's probably an obvious thing that I'm missing, but that's how I kind of read it.
I'm seeing a lot of discussion in the chat about these very explicitly Christian passages. Do you have any thoughts about what that says about the dating of the poem, or about whether, you know, is it an organic part of the whole, or something accreted to it? What do you say?
That's a very good thing to bring up. I'm kind of in two minds, because it might just be that I missed a bit of literature, but I'm not aware of anything in the poem, apart from the fact that there's a load of dialect words in it, which suggests maybe it's been through a few geographic areas. I don't know of anything structural about it that says it must have been composed ages before it was written down, in the same way that you do get with Old Norse poetry. So it's possible that it was composed not that long before it was written, which was probably about the year 1000, give or take maybe 20 years, 30 years. So it's possible that it was written post-Christianization, so post, say, like 650, post 700. and had the pagan elements, which will come later, added into it to make it reflective of the time that it's set. I don't know, because it does seem like the Christian elements do kind of, it doesn't feel like the story suddenly cuts to a modern copy pasted bit, you know, that somebody's shoved in. It doesn't feel like that to me, but then it's possible that it's evolved organically while it's been an oral tradition to have those things added to it, and by the time it's written down, those things have kind of blended into it. So I don't know one way or another, but it's definitely interesting to think about. Do you have an opinion of that, Jackson?
Yeah, I'll make some short remarks about it. I think that it's actually a lot like the Saga of Hrolfkraki, which, you know, the sagas we have it is written down in like 1450 or something, right? It's pretty late. But we have stories in it that are referred to in poetry, some of the oldest poetry in Old Norse, right? That we can date to probably the 800s or 900s. I think there's probably some really old stories here, but I think that the composition of the poem does feel like an organic whole. I think that the composer was a Christian. You know, I don't feel like the language changes dramatically when we start talking about Christian stuff, and it doesn't feel like it's out of place, right? You know, and it's not sermonizing, right? You know, I think in the commentary, Klaber or Niles and Folk pointed out that actually in the Aeneid, there's a weird place where a bard or something just suddenly tells a creation story. So it's not, it doesn't feel like it's forced in. You do have the interesting stuff that we're coming up on about, you know, them turning back to heathenism and their fears about Grendel, which could feel maybe a little bit evangelizing in the way that it's talked about. But also one thing I think is an interesting question to ask, if we're talking about the dating of Beowulf, which is, you know, it's one of the most long-standing, most carped about problems in this whole field. But one thing I think has to be kept in mind is that it is positive about Scandinavians.
Yeah,
and there's there's a long period in England they are not positive about Scandinavians in. I have a really hard time believing that this comes from like Alfred the Great's time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas when the manuscript itself is from, which I understand people still say like early 11th century, right? Like 1000s. That's a time when relations are pretty good with Scandinavia, and you get, you know, actual Danish kings of England. I wonder if a poem like this, while based on earlier traditions, could well be composed like right about then, because it's sort of culturally about the right time. Like, oh, I'm going to reach for, I know a good story about Scandinavians. It could even be based on Scandinavian material.
This is something the chat has suggested that I think, Richard Carlson, I think that was the suggestion. Does this text reflect being authored in a Christianized England or a Scandinavian original text with later additions?
I don't think, to be clear, although I have a Scandinavian bias, I don't think it is based on a Scandinavian original. Wait, Luke says I just convinced him about something. I don't know what I just convinced him about, but I'm like, I convince maybe one person a year of one thing, so that's it's a big deal. But I do think that the material about Hrothgar's family is so different from what we see in Scandinavian tradition that I don't think that it's based on a Scandinavian original.
No, and I think that it's too cohesive in Old English poem as well to have been. Yeah. What were you saying? Sorry.
But I think like actually maybe for one thing, if it were based on a Scandinavian original, it might be a lot more specific about the heathenism stuff.
Yes.
But you know, you might like they turned to Thor or whatever instead of this very vague kind of biblical, you know, they worshipped idols stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I lean toward early material, late composition. Oh, and Simon, maybe a different Simon. And the chat says it's Sigmund that killed
Oh,
the
yeah.
dragon Beowulf. And yeah, so that's another thing because it's totally different from Scandinavian tradition where it's Sigurdur. Okay, it's Simon Dickey. Sigurdur is the one who kills the dragon, not his father, Sigmund. Yeah. So
Okay.
I think it's English tradition, but I think that we have to account for what is their attitude towards Scandinavians at the time, and I think it comes from a time that's not right in the middle of the Viking raids.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm sure
or
a man
around
has argued this. Sorry, I'll shut up. What were you saying?
Oh no, I think I was basically parroting what you said, but in a different way. But then at the same time, I suppose they are they're not that unpleasant about the heathens, at least not the way I read it. So maybe the fact that they're not explicitly unpleasant about Scandinavians, although I suppose a whole poem of this length about that's sympathetic to Scandinavians might be a bit of a push.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think England is mentioned, is it?
Not as far
I
as
think every single. Yeah, I think every single place in it is Scandinavian or Frisian, right? Because there's that one episode. Yeah. You want me to give a shot at Act 2 here?
I would be happy for you to give a shot at Act 2 if you're happy to do so.
All right, we are doing this slow, but it's worth doing slow if you're going to do it.
I think so. Yeah.
All right, fit 2. Jowatta neosian sytha nicht bekon, hean huses, who hit ringdena after bear thea jabun havdon. Band thought there in adalinga jedrick, swevan after simble, sorgen ekudon, one sheath wera. Wicht unhallo, grim und gradi, jeer sona was, rök und rede, und on resta janam, priti feina. Dan on eftia wat hude hremi to ham paran, med thera välfylla wicka neosa. Da was on uchtan med erdeja, Grendels gudkraft gumum dirna. Da was after wista wop up ahaven, Mitchell Morgan sway. Mara Theoden, Adeling ergo, blida sat, followed at Rydsvud, Tain soria dreach, Sidan hie thes ladan last shewedan, Werian gastes, Westet je wind to strong, lad und langsam, Nes hit lengra fyrst, ac anna nicht, eft je fremede, mord bela mara. On no mer fora, pechte und hyrene, west ho fest on fan. Da was binde they him ellis where je rumlikor reste, sochtse. Bed after burum, tha him je beekner was, je sad soodliche sweltelen takne, heel thenes hitte. Heeld binnen Sudan, Fyr und pastor se them feonde at wand. Swa riksode and with richte wand. Anna with elum. Of that idel stod. Husa sailest. Was seo wheel mitchell. 12 winter tid torn je tholode winne skyldiga. Weana je welchna. Sidra storia. Fordan je suna wer, de bernum, dirnekud, jedun jeomora, tata Grendel wan, huila with Hrothgar, kette nives way, fyrene on fechte fella misera, stingala seche, sibene wolde with mana wonne meanes daniga, per beola, beoran, thea thingian, Nether nani wittena wenan forte, bertra bote to banan folmum. Axe eilatche echtende was, derk decht sjua, Dugutha und Yeogatha, Selmada und Syrada, Stin nicht de held misti amoras, Menne kunon huider hella runan hyrtum skrida. Swa fele fyrarna feond mankunas atol an gengea of je fremede, herdra hynda, Heorot erdada, sinch vaga sail swertum nichtum. No he thona gifstol gretan mosta, mathum for metoda, nei his mune wisse. That was Rek Mitchell, when a skyldinga, modes brekta. Moni oft je sett richeto runa, rad echtron, quat sweet hertum celest wara with fær grirum to je fremman. Huilum hier je heton et herktravum, weig werthunga wortum badum, that him gastbona, jilche je fremmede, with theod preal. Swilch was theo hyra, Hatenra hy, hella jamundon in moodsevan, metod hier nekudon, dada demon, ne wisdom hier drichten god, ne hier huru hevon helm herion nekudon, wuldres walden. Wa bethamt the shale hurs, liefne nius, aule beshuvan, in fyrus faden, frovre ne wena, wichte jewenda, Well bethamt the moat after death they at dritten Sechean, unto father Fatmon, Freota, William. Yeah, I think it's a little appreciated.
I think that deserves a round of applause.
Oh, really?
It does
Hey,
get
here's
a
a
bit,
question.
yeah. What's that? Sorry?
I got a pronunciation question for you. My line 163. So for somebody else, I guess it'd be 326 if you've got a half-line edition. Skridad, is that Skridad or Shridad? I guess it's Shridad.
I would, oh my. I see, I've transcribed it as sk, but I don't think it would be. I don't know why I've transcribed it that. I think it would be sh.
Yeah, I think
Shridad.
I read it Skridad because of my Scandinavian prejudices, but I actually think all those SCs are probably shows now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, that's
Do you-
true.
Do you have like a basic Old English pronunciation video that you could point people to?
I haven't. I know somebody else who has a good one.
You should totally make that video. It would probably do well for you.
I think I will. I don't want to take away from this other guy's video. That's the only thing. But I could ask him how he feels about it. But yeah, so as a general thing, Deb asks, what are the rules for pronouncing C? So if there's, it's a bit more complicated than this, but if it's basically if it's next to a front vowel, so like e, a, it's normally pronounced ch, unless there's a back vowel like u or a on the other side of it. So in a lot of cases it's ch, otherwise it's normally k. I think that's a fairly good explanation. I think there's certain situations where if it comes around e, which is like a rounded front vowel, it hasn't palatalized, so it's still k. So that's why kinning, like the word for king, has a k rather than a ch.
It's basically Norwegian palatalization rules for people who are familiar with something like
Does it work the
Norwegian
same?
or Swedish. Yeah.
Didn't realize it's palatalized sometimes.
Yeah, in Old Norse, of course, none of that has happened yet, but now in Norwegian and Swedish, there's a very similar palatalization before front vowels.
Mm.
So.
I think in Italian
All
as well.
right. Yeah, right. All right, so then he left to spy after night came, or to maybe to spy on the high house, how the ring dames, after their beer taking, their beer receiving, Yeah, there's a lot of frat houses where there's a lot of Beorthea. Had settled. And then he found therein the group of nobles sleeping after their feast. They did not know sorrow, did not know, I assume still object of the same verb, the misery of men. A creature of evil creature, grim and greedy, was soon ready, fierce and fierce, fierce and cruel, fierce and brutal. And he took 30 thanes in their resting place. It's interesting. This is a kind of archaic, isn't it? Where you have the number 30 with the genitive plural, 30 of things. Isn't that kind of archaic?
Yeah, I would say that was archaic. Yeah.
Lucaneer says hungry for greedy. That might be better. I mean, either way.
Is that early? Does that persist fairly late in Old Norse, having the genitive after a number like that, like 30 of?
Well, like early versus late, it's hard to compare Old Norse and Old English because, 300 years after this, Old Icelandic is in a lot of ways more archaic. So, I don't know how to.
Yeah,
I would say in Old Norse, like if I was reading something from the early 1200s or like a poem, I would say, oh yeah, that's normal. But if I was reading, prose in the late 1200s or later, I would think that was kind of old fashioned. From there, afterwards, he departed, exulting in the spoils, went to home. I guess he yawat far onto home. He left to go home.
Yeah.
With that, it's just like his. So he left to seek his harbors, his bays, with that corpse full, like he's got his fill of corpses.
Yeah, so that's Man, I gave that as an corpse full. Yeah,
this is our second really heavy metal moment because Fit 1 ends with from there the bad offspring all woke up and then there was, and am I seeing two words for morning? Then there was in the morning, like amid the early part of the day, Uchtan mid Erdea. Because I'm thinking Old Norse Ochta, which is like it's like the dark part of the morning. Is that what this is?
Uchtan. I've translated it as dawn, but I think in Bosworth Toller it is something
dawn.
Like dark morning, like early morning. I think in Bosworth Toller it's not dawn, it's like something else that means dawn, like dark morning or something like that. And like you say, Ardaya is definitely early day. So yeah, just two words for kind of dawn morning.
So then in the morning, Grendel's slaughtercraft, his battle strength maybe, was unhidden from men. That's very Latodic.
Yeah.
Then there was, after feasting, weeping was begun. Great morning noise.
I think Wister could just, I think a lot of translations have it as feasting, but I think it could also just be eating. I think it's kind of ambiguous, like having a meal.
So is it Grendel eating, or is it the men eating? Because before they went to sleep, they ate a big meal. Yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, I interpreted it as the men eating, like after they'd eaten something, they started crying. But yeah, actually, that's true. It could be was after Wister was as a result of the eating. They were upset or something like that. Yeah, that's true.
So I'm not sure who we're talking about eating. The great Theoden, great king, the very good chieftain, sat unhappy, unblithe, the powerful one endured. He suffered Thane sorrow about his Thanes.
Yeah.
After he saw the hateful footprint of the cursed spirit, the cursed ghost, the cursed monster.
Mm.
And I wasn't sure what to do with Yowen. That's too strong. I almost, when I was going through this the first time, I thought, is this Yowen? Was the wine too strong? Is he being is he coming off of a hangover? Is he regretting that he drank too much in the past night? But I don't think that's what it is. But it was just an idle thought that occurred to me. Too strong, hateful, and slow. What are you doing with Yowen?
I had it as upset. I think I got that from Bosworth Toller, but I should really put links to these things because I think it's in my version it doesn't have a length diacritic, but then my version.
No, mine neither.
Okay.
Mine neither.
My version.
But just to,
what's that, sorry?
As an Old Norse guy, I'm extremely skeptical of the length marks or lack thereof in anybody's edition. I'm just like, you put these there, so I always kind of feel welcome to speculate. But
to be fair, that I think the edition I'm working from is from the 1880s, and that was when they acknowledged this in a later edition of it. That was around when the standard places where the length markers are put were still kind of being negotiated. So for people who were watching, Old English and Old Norse both had contrastive vowel length, which means that if you said a word with I or E, it made a difference to the meaning of the word, or U and U. This is clear because other Germanic languages preserve distinctions between words, where in Old English and Old Norse, the only difference would be the length of the vowel. And also modern English treats differently words that had a long vowel in Old English versus words that had a short vowel in Old English. So it's clear that this difference did exist, but people, at least in Old English, there was no recording of it at the time. They didn't put any kind of marker to indicate length. So academics since then have had to kind of work out which vowels were long and which vowels were short. And that probably, there was probably some variation from place to place. That kind of thing is kind of dynamic in modern English, although, yeah, so there's certain places where long versus short vowels could be kind of quibbled with. And yeah, like Jackson says, that for Old English, the author has always put them in themselves or got them from another modern author. So although they generally, reputable authors have seem to have a pretty good idea for it, it's a modern kind of interpretation.
Yeah, y'all on the Old English side have it a little bit harder because we have Icelandic, where for the most part the same distinctions are still preserved.
Yeah.
I mean, or the same phonemic distinctions are preserved, even though it's a little bit different because it's qualitatively different now. But the meter can help. Sometimes the meter can tell you, it needs to be long or short.
Yeah, that's true. And there is the one text, the Ormulum, from very late. Well, kind of
right.
between Old and Middle English, and that's, as far as I know, that's the only thing that could be described as an Old English text, but it's kind of borderline. Where
and a couple runic inscriptions have double the vowels.
Okay. Oh,
Pikes by Adrian asks about Old English length markers. Usually they use the macron, but sometimes I've seen the acute marker.
But yeah, sorry, diversion.
All right, sorry, I ran into the question there. All right, it was not long. This is interesting because it's almost like it was not longer. As a fluid English, I would say it was not long before, but it's like it was not longer first. But during or after, maybe one night after, he did more murder evil. Right? So I guess one night later he did more murder evil. and never mourned for it. Is he not mourning for it?
I interpreted it like it didn't bother him to do it, like he didn't feel guilty, that kind of thing.
I think that's probably about right. Did not mourn for the the pain and the evil. It was too strong on that one. Is the evil too strong on him, or something like that?
I've
you think that's
translated the last bit as so Fach and Firene, which you could translate with just any two horrible words like violence and brutality. Was I've put a pronoun in there in the translation. I've said he was too entrenched in those, like they were too stuck.
Oh, he was
too stuck in the that could be.
He's stuck too fast to his evil ways. Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking it. Okay. Then it was easily found that to him otherwise where he sought his rest, his bed after rooms, his bed for rooms. Is this, I think the gist that I'm getting here is that it was actually pretty easy to figure out where he went after this. Right?
So this whole bit, I think it's one of those things where I kind of read it and I think I get the gist, but trying to translate it bit by bit is very difficult. So you may disagree because I'm not 100% sure about this, but I've translated this whole bit as people very quickly realized that it was more sensible to live far away from the hall, out in the ballroom, out in like the cottages or the safer countryside, and the further you were from school at night, the safer you'd be. So I think this is all part of that, but I could be wrong there. So because
there's a bunch of that would make some more sense, that the one who further away sought his rest, your room of the core rest, is so.
Yeah. Then so it Star Wars how they find it could be like, then you could easily see, like if you were there, you could easily tell that the ones that sought rest at a greater distance, kind of thing. Yeah.
It was obvious is probably a better way of putting it, just easily found. Yeah, it was obvious. Okay. When it was shown to them, beaconed to them, said truly a clear token of the Hallthane's hate. He held him afterwards. Is this further and stronger, the one who fled the fiend?
That's pretty much how
so I guess this is really what you're kind of saying, is it 141 to like 143, or I guess 286 for the half line editions. This is really kind of the subject, the one who fled further and stronger. Right. Okay. And he's the subject of all the stuff about seeking his rest further away. It's shown to him a clear token. Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. Like I get the gist, but it's hard to translate.
Yeah. I think it's yeah.
So he ruled and did with right alone, against all or with all? Can with be commutative in Old English?
Yeah, I think so. So in this case, I think it's with. Oh, hang on. I think I may have misunderstood the word you said.
Against right.
Against
so he ruled and fought against right, one against all. Okay.
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about, Grendel. Until the happiest of houses stood idle. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a great while, a long time, 12 winters' time, they endured, or 12 winters' time, the friend of the Scyldings, Hrothgar, endured anger, each kind of woe, long-lasting sorrows.
That sounds. Yeah.
Okay. Before there came to the sons of men, unhidden and known. Is this the sight, Yeshina?
Where's that? Sorry, clearly known.
149, or I guess it'd be 299-ish for half-line people.
Sidra.
Oh, visible. Yeshina, visible. Okay. So before it became visible to the sons of men, unhidden and known. Yeah. So it's actually a word that's supplied in Klaber. I just realized. Let me look at the apparatus. So some editors have Sivan there. It's for them. So after 148, Wayana Yohelchna Sidra Sorga, for them, the next word, different editors do different things. And so
okay, that explains a lot, because I've got Sejung, and then
okay.
I think I've miswritten that though, because in the Harrison and Sharp text it says Sidhan, like you said.
Okay, so I'll take it with Yasena, like Klaber says. So before it became visible to men, unhidden and known, Dir Nakuth, there's sad songs, Yarma Yidden, that Grendel fought a long time against Hrothgar. Is he on the hate and evil's way? Heta Nida's way?
So I think this is from Bosworth Toller. I think I've translated Y as like sustained, although it would also mean
it's a verb.
Okay.
Like endure. So Hrothgar is still enduring evil's hate, Hetanivas, pain and conflict, many seasons. Always.
Actually, I think this is talking about Grendel at this point.
Well, that makes sense if he's always guilty, right? Singala Sacha, something like that. He did not want peace, Sibene Wolda, with regard to any man of the country of the Danes, with the far life curse, life evil.
Like life, yeah.
And I think this is still Ne Wolda. He wouldn't pay money, right? He won't pay a weary-old for what he's done.
Yeah.
Never there any of the wise men needed to hope for right payment in the hands of the killer. So I guess this is still talking about the idea that he's not going to pay weary-old.
Yeah, I think so.
But the fear maker, the monster, was persisting. This is almost kind of a progressive verb, progressive participle. The dark death shadow.
Dark death shadow,
yeah. Persecuting the veterans and the young men.
Yeah.
He loitered and he ambushed. He held the long night, the sin nichte, right? The misty moors. Men did not know in which way, and this is feminine, right? Witches, basically.
Yeah, this is a bit of a weird one. This is another one of the words kind of overlapping in meaning, for words for super things kind of overlapping in meaning.
This is another kind of metal moment where the hell runes, the witches, where they traveled on paths. So men didn't know where monsters traveled.
Yeah.
So many violences, the enemy of mankind, the fierce alone walker often did hard humiliation. So he did so that the enemy, there's many violences and many hard humiliations. He raided Heorot, the rich decorated hall, and the Black Knights.
I had it as like out of it as like dwelled, like lived, but
Oh,
I don't.
inhabited. Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah.
I don't know if the implication is that he comes back to it every night and kills anyone if they're in there, or if he actually lives in it. I feel like that's kind of ambiguous at this point. Although, like, since it talks about nobody knows where the monsters go at night, I don't know. Maybe there's some implication that he's kind of hovering, watching it.
I think in Simon Roper's Beowulf, a really fun translation here would be he squatted in Heorot, right? Because it's basically his at night, right?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that in Simon Roper's Beowulf. There's a lot of controversy I read about the next couple lines. So he never could approach the throne, and so there's apparently quite a bit of controversy about whether this is Hrothgar's throne or God's throne, because method is often used for God. In fact, my very first conference paper was about method in Beowulf.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I actually, it was right before Folk and Niles and Björk published this 4th edition of Kleber, and they told me, or I talked to Folk about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, we came to a lot of the same conclusions you did, but it's still hard to know what's going on here because it's like treasures from God, maybe." And then who is the subject in Ne his Mina Wissa, which would be that's 169, or I guess 390, 339 or something for half-line people. So is it him? Did Grendel not take thought of it? Or did God not take thought of Grendel?
See, I read it differently. I read it as Grendel being the subject. I read it as like not of his, like he didn't feel of his love or something like that. Wisse.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is that? Oh no, sorry. Mina
difficult lines. So you're taking Mina as something like love.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And I also took Morster as like he didn't like feel like he had to. He didn't feel like he didn't feel compelled to approach the throne or a chair. Almost like maybe.
But this verb can take a lot of different senses, right? Like it can be permitted, it can be must, it can be could, right?
Yeah.
So it seems kind of tough.
Very, very ambiguous.
Yeah. So just to highlight some of the difficulties there. That was great suffering for, I think, the friend of the Schildings, for Hrothgar. Misery of heart, of mind. Many often sat to whisper in the kingdom. They had counsel, and rad, what would be happiest for the strong-minded to do to Euphramina against sudden attacks. So many would often sit and hold counsel about what to do about this.
Yeah.
Before they sacrificed, right? They made offerings at like altar tents. It's cognate with the word Heorot that comes up as cairns in Old Norse.
Right.
They made honors to idols, Weirthunga or we. They asked in words, bade in words that to them help against the people distress with Theod Threawum. Are they asking the soul kill? Is the soul killer Grendel, or is it the pagan god that they're asking? The soul killers should give them help against the people distress.
See, I think I'd mistranslated that. I translated that as monster killer, but I realise it says ghast rather
Oh,
than
monster
ghast.
killer. Yeah.
I think I might
Okay.
be wrong, because it spells the monster one as ghast, whereas it spells this as ghast. So I think spirit killer. Oh, that's very good. So I didn't even think about that.
Is this our fourth or our fifth really metal word? Okay. Yeah, I think it's actually, I'm kind of thinking, you know, when I was first glancing at this, I thought soul killer, this got to be Grendel, but actually I think it might be the pagan god, because this gets pretty preachy pretty fast. Such was their custom, the heathen's way. They remembered hell in their hearts. They did not know God, the judger of deeds. They did not know their Lord God. Nor did they know nor hear how heaven's helm, or hear about heaven's helm, the ruler of wonder. Woe is to that one who shall, through dire distress, shove his soul into the embrace of the fire. Right?
That sounds
pretty metal again. Not expect comfort, not change at all. So I'm going to take your wind done week to, right? Like they're not repenting. They're not
change anything. Yeah.
But well is for that one who may seek his Lord after his death day and ask for peace at his father's embrace. Yeah, that got real fire and brimstone.
It got, but the thing is, I think it's although it's preachy, it's also, I feel like you could read it as being kind of sympathetic to them, because I feel like there's some sense of they don't know what, that they're not, you know, like they haven't been able to become Christians yet, rather than they're choosing not to. I think there's actually, is it the word Mischte? Hang on, let me have a look.
It's not super condemnatory.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, he's sad for them, right? I mean, actually, but this is a preacher's technique too, right? Like I was noticing, he says in 185, or what would that be, 361, something like that. They didn't hope for consolation. Like, I'm sad that you're not going to be saved, right?
Yeah.
I'm sad that you don't have that hope, right? That is kind of a preacher technique, so I kind of get it.
That's true. Yeah.
Comments, questions, condemnations from the audience. There's probably people in my audience, and especially yours, who'd like to see me shove my soul into the fire's embrace.
No, why would they want that?
I don't know why I like that so much. Beshuvan Saul.
There's just I wonder if that sounded as violent at the time as it does now.
I love it somehow. Kathy's probably right. The people who want me to do that aren't here.
They haven't waited almost 3 hours for us to.
Yeah. So my out. I have to go somewhere at 5. So I need to leave at 4 something. So I don't know if I have 2 more fits in me in terms of time.
Oh, I was counting the prologue as 1, so I was thinking the next one was the last one.
Oh, so are we going to finish at 3? That would also be even between you and me.
Yeah.
That would not be too bad.
That could be that. If that's all right. Yeah, if we just do 4.
I think do 4 next time. That's totally acceptable to me. I think probably the best part of it is that neither one of us prepared a written translation. I think that was actually something that sometimes in classrooms is actually a little bit of a hindrance. You tell students we're going to read such and such fits of Beowulf, and they write out translations. But I think that often is not actually as good for understanding the original. right? I deliberately didn't write out a translation. And I don't know about you, I'm not reading through a translation, right? Like I'll check and go see like, what did Ringler or Williamson do with this? But and I'm way too much of a hipster to look at Haney. You know, everybody reads Haney. So.
I'd made myself a little gloss just because there are quite a few words that I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but that's kind of a literal gloss with like the case written in brackets and exactly in the same order. So it's kind of.
Oh yeah, I've just scribbled all over it, you know. Yeah.
Right.
All right.
So shall I give it a go then?
Let's rock. Let's shove our souls in it.
Swa.
All right.
Hang on, am I reading the right one? Yeah, I am. Swa tha malchare maha haufdenes singala south nemichtes notor halif wown on wendan or on wendan, depending on how you stress that. Was that ye win to Swiss laugh and longsum there on sa leude bekom need raku Niesgrim, nicht Balwa mast. That from harm je frein, hielakes thein, god mediatum, Grendles dada. Se was mankinnes maienes, strengest on tham daie thisses lives, adele and arken. Het him easily done. Would that be voiced? Yeah, I think it would. Het him easily done. Godna je juron. Quath he goose kinning over swanrade. Sedjaun wolde. Marne theoden. Tha him was manna tharf. Thonne seath vat him snottere cheurlas, liet hon, loron, thach he him leofware, hueton, hielo ovne, al shawedum. Havde se goda jauta leuda, chimpan je korone, thare thehi chenoste findan mite. 15. I wasn't sure whether to stress like 15 or 15 sum.
Yeah.
Udu sorte sedge wizade. Lahu krafti man landje mirku. First fort je wat flota was on idum bat under Belge. Beornas jarwe on steven stigon. Stramas bundon, sund with sande, sedjas baron on baron nakan, belte fratwe. Guth sauro jatod lich, guman ut shuvon, whereas on wheel seeth, wudu bundene, Gemini consonant. Jewatha over Wyholm, winde je feesed, Flotte farmy house, Fogle je likost, og that in antid odres dogores, wonden stevna je wadan, og je waden havde. That sa lidende land je sawon, brimklivu blikan, belras staupe, side Sanassas, Thawas sundliden, Eulitas at ende. Thanun up, Rade, Wedera leude on wangstion, Saudon, Sirkan Rhysedon, Guthie wadu, o wado. Gode Sanchedon, thus the him I lade, alve wurdon. Tha of waule jesar. Ward Schildinga. Sethe holmklivu haudan sjolde. Beron over Balkan. Belrandas. Fyrdsaru fusliku. Hine fyrwit brak. Modjehidum. Quat thamen warum. Je wat him thato warode. Widje ridan thein rothgaris. Thrimmum quechte mayenvudu mundum. Medelwordum frein. Quat sindon je sauro habendra. Birnum verede. The thus brontne chel. Over lavustrate ladan quomon. Hider over holmas helmas baron. It was in the sata. Oh yeah, so I think this is another one that changes, but I'll talk about that in a bit. It was in the sata. I woude held that on land denna. Ladra nani mid ship herje. Skeddan ne marte. No her kudlikor kuman on gunnon. Lindhabende neje lauvnes word. Guth fremmendra jaurwe ne wisson. Mara je medu. Navre ich maran jesar. Eura over eurlan. Thonne is euer sum. Sedge on saurum. Nistat selguma. Wapnum jewerrath. Navne him his wite leure. Anlich unseen. Nu ich eure shall frumkin witon. Je fyrheunan. Lause shaweras. On land denna furður feran. Nu je förboend. Merelidende. Mine je hyrath. Anfaldne je thort. Ovost is celest to je kudane. No, sorry, je kudane. Quanan eure kyme syndon. That's another metal line, I think. Thank you. Apologies for doing it so slowly.
Two thoughts I just want to point out before you start giving us some translation. We still have not heard the name Beowulf.
That's true.
Right? He's appeared now, but he's not said his name, and no one has said his name. Second thing is another pronunciation question. Because of my Old Norse reflexes, I always read S voiceless. And I realize it's sometimes actually going to be voiced in Old English. I'm just so unused to voicing it. Where are you voicing it word finally? Like, it sounds like you're saying is, but then I felt like with some plurals and things like that, I heard you keeping it voiceless. What's your thoughts on that?
So in is, it should be voiceless, and I probably make the mistake of voicing it because
it should be.
I think it should be, yeah. So I think that's my mistake as a modern English speaker, looking at it and just reading it as, oh, that's is. So I think that should be voiceless. I think it's the same, in theory, it's the same for all fricatives. So surf, they are voiceless word initially and word finally, and they're voiced, hang on, let me see if I can get this right. They're voiced intervocalically, so if they're between two vowels, and they're also voiced if they're in between a stressed vowel and a voiced consonant. So word finally, it should be voiceless. Although I suppose I could use the excuse of sometimes these phonological rules work across word boundaries. So maybe if the word is was followed by a word that started with a vowel, maybe in rapid speech people would voice it just because the.
Sure.
But that's just me making up excuses. But
no, yeah, I figured you had a sense of what was going on there. I also see a question in the chat that's relevant. 240, or I guess 480 if you're reading a half-line edition, you're going to see a lot of different things in different editions and translations, because I think the manuscript goes hider over homos was. So there's some missing words there that are supplied differently in different editions and translations. Like mine has ich huila was, and I heard you read something different.
Yeah, so mine has hider over homos helmasparum.
Okay.
Sorry.
Pretty different.
Then it has a question mark. I don't know if that's part of the but yeah.
Oh well, there's definitely.
Oh no, that actually that would make sense as part of the.
Yeah, and then Blake as an addition was something totally different.
Okay, so it seems people like translators are just filling in the blanks. So
all right.
So then, in the time sorrow, in the sorrow of the time, the son of Halfdane constantly brooded. So this is now Halfdane's son, so Hrothgar's grandson, I think, isn't it? Not could. So how would I?
Where
the wise hero couldn't dispel this woe.
Hrothgar is Halfdane's son, isn't he?
I think
he is Halfdane's son.
Oh, maybe.
I think Maga just means son. Like Old Norse Mogar, the cognate is just son. I mean, it can be descendant, but I think it's fine to just say son here, or kinsman, whatever, you know.
Okay.
Also, a funny Old Norse thing. When I first read this, I was thinking about some of these phrases that we've seen before, like where was it? Where it was like, you know, him, yeah, like line 49 or 98. Him West Yarma Seba, like to them was a sad mind. My Old Norse reflexes here was thinking like something basically like then was care in the gut, maga, because there's a word magi in Old Norse. It's like the gut. So I'm like, okay, yeah, his gut is full of care, but yeah, I don't think that's what it is.
That's interesting. Would you describe that as a false friend issue between?
I think it's a false friend issue. Yeah, but
friend issue. That's an issue I had with all of my friends at some point.
False friend issue. I'm sorry.
No, I'm joking. So that pain too strong, loathful, and drawn out that it sort of came on the people. Another couple of words meaning horrible things. Cruel, savage is how I translated them. Night evil, greatest. So the pain that came on the people, the greatest evil of the night, was too strong and hateful and drawn out, longsome, drawn out, I suppose.
Did you say something for ne michte snotar haleth wan on Windon? I didn't hear what you said for that. Last half of 190 and the first half of 191.
Like the wise hero couldn't dispel this woe. Okay.
Yeah, maybe you said that and I missed it because I was looking at
I may not have said it because I think we started talking about Halfdane. So the greatest evil of the night was too hateful and drawn out. That from home, from where he lived, Heorot's Thane, and I don't think we've heard of Heorot yet. Heorot. Heorot's Thane, a good man of the Yaudum, the Geats is how people pronounce it, how I've heard archaeology lecturers pronounce it, because that's kind of how it's spelled, so I'll just say that. A good man of the Geats, became aware of what Grendel was doing. So Jefrain him Grendlis dada. So he became aware of what Grendel was doing, Grendel's deeds. He was of mankind's strength strongest, is how I've glossed that. So he was the strongest. He was.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
On that day, in this life, of this life, noble and powerful, ordered them a wave traverser, a good one, to prepare. So he ordered people to prepare a ship, a good one. He said he wanted to seek the War King, which must mean Hrothgar, I suppose, over the Swan Road, the Swanrade, which is another fun, lesser-known kenning for sea. I think that's a fun one, because I don't see swans on the sea. I don't know about you, but the swans, are there swans in the... That's a stupid question, isn't it? Do you have swans?
Well, you live closer to the place this is about. Like,
yeah.
I think mute swans do land in the ocean, because you have mute swans, right? We have we have tundra swans sometimes. Trying to remember what the main type is that we see. But we have two kinds here. But I don't live anywhere close to an ocean, so I don't know. Anyway, I like Swan Road too.
That's a good point. My sister, somebody pointed out in Bays, my sister lives next to a kind of brackish bit of water in Kent, and she sees swans on that a lot. So maybe, maybe I'm just not.
But they pay a lot of attention to swans, right? I mean, maybe I'm thinking again through a Norse lens, but they're so associated with the Valkyries.
That's
right?
true.
They come up constantly in association with Valkyries, and in Old Norse, we have a different word for male and the female. I don't remember if the female word, because it's Alft, long A L P T is the female in Old Norse. I don't know if Old English makes a distinction, but
I'm not sure.
But yeah, I like the Swan Road.
Yeah, I like that very much. I feel like that should rank alongside Whale Road, but I feel like Whale Road is the one that's got public attention.
Yeah, I'm too much of a hipster to like Whale Road. Everybody knows that kenning. And then we get Theoden. Theoden's back.
So because, hang on. Right, so hang on, where am I? Okay, so he ordered them to...
You read... you read over Swanrada, Secha, and Wolda.
Over Swanrada. So, and that's another kenning for, let's see, mighty leader of people, because he to himself was of men needy. So Hrothgar needs men. So this guy who is Beowulf, but he hasn't been named in the poem yet, ordered them to people to prepare a good ship, because he wanted to go and help Hrothgar with his problem. That journey to him, wise men or countrymen, Cheulas, very few of them disapproved of it. So, or that's I don't know, maybe disapproved is a silly word to use.
I think it's more of that fun lightities that's so characteristic of Beowulf. I also wondered, is Lithwan the object? Did they criticize like very little?
That's a good point. Hang on, let me see.
Just a random thought.
So I would say wise countrymen is the subject.
Yeah.
I'm
not disagreeing with that.
Oh, no,
I just mean
oh yeah, hang on. So if you think of it as like, hang on, I'm trying to work this out. The countrymen subject didn't because I'm thinking of that, the journey as the object, the direct object, and then him as the kind of indirect object. But then
could let one be kind of an adverbial accusative is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Like it's not worth dwelling on exactly, but I just took it as like, that's how I read it, was they criticized him little, like they offered little to
oh, okay. Yeah, maybe that makes sense. So they yeah, that makes more sense. So they didn't approve very much. They didn't disapprove very much. Because although he doesn't say because, so though he beloved to them was, and here I've just, again, I've taken somebody else's translation because I couldn't work it out. So this person's translation, who I will reference on the screen, is they urged on the valiant hearted one, omens beheld. So even though the sort of wise people of his country liked him and they didn't want him to get hurt, they didn't disapprove of what he was doing by going out and helping Hrothgar. Have to say, Gorda had the good one, Geatish people, of Geatish people, champions chosen, the bravest, those that he bravest find could. So like the good one had chosen champions from the Geatish people, the bravest ones he could find. 15 sum. I've translated some 15 people, maybe, but
I think it's right. Yeah.
Sundwood, seaward sort. So seaward, I'm thinking, is a kenning for ship. Warriors led, so he led the warriors. Sea capable men to the shore, to the land boundary. Again, I think there's no preposition there, but I'm interpreting it as that, like he led these sea capable men to the shore.
Yeah, I almost wondered if he was leading them, literally by the cognate landmarks, like he led them by the landmarks. He knows the way to the shores.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's quite nice actually. Fyrst, which I think means time. I think that's a possible translation of that. So time forth travelled or went. So time went on. The ship was on waves, boat under cliffs. The boat was under cliffs.
On a cliff, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's true. Men ready on prow stepped. Currents swirled, like curled around. Sea against sand. Men carried, or like bore, carried into the lap of the boat, bright ornaments, which I've seen translated as armor. I think it's not that specific, but I think it does imply armor because it then says like war equipment, goods, sauro. War equipment prepared, pushed, men outpushed, like they pushed out into the sea. Men on a welcome journey, a will seeth. Woodu bunden, so bound in wood, wrapped in wood, which I think is quite a nice little way of putting it. Went then over Wyholm, wave sea, propelled by or readied by the wind, ship foamy necked, bird most like, So like, I guess more like a bird than anything else, maybe, or very much like a bird, until at or about the Arntide, the appointed time. On the second day, the curved prow had travelled, or had I take that to mean it's like finished its journey, maybe, or maybe the second day that the ship had been travelling. I don't think does have a reflex in modern English, as far as I know, although it has one in well, not a reflex, but a cognate in German, which is That's
true.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? My headphones ran out of battery.
I can. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But the travellers saw land shining, like sea cliffs shining, high towering Beowulf. Is that the bit we're at? Beowulf. Yeah, so I suppose that could mean like hills, or it could just mean shore, or I don't know. It's kind of, I feel like that's kind of an ambiguous word. I think there's a lot of translations for that in Bosworth Toller.
But you know what? No matter what it does not actually sound like Denmark, right? I mean, that's part of what's
that's true. Yeah,
is he's supposed to be showing up in Zealand or whatever, and this is not what it looks like when you show up on the shore of Zealand.
I suppose it's like an Englishman's account of dramatic landscape, whereas it's just like flat ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, so towering, maybe hills, wide Sanassus peninsulas, or I've seen headlands used for that. Thoasund Liden. Then was sea, travelled across or traversed. Voyage at end, so voyage at its end.
So what are you doing with Eolitis? Is that your first word in 224?
Yeah, Eolitis, I took that as voyage.
Okay, as far as I know, this is a hotbox. So a lot of, it's kind of like take it as what you want to take it as, because there's no particularly, I dug into it a little bit and I didn't see any particularly convincing account of what it could be cognate with or anything.
Okay. Maybe I think I took it from Bosworth Toller, but I imagine that's probably just because they've looked at this and thought voyage, it makes the most sense in this context.
Yeah. But it's just one of those words where kind of whatever you throw in there, context is sort of equally valid.
Yeah. I realized looking at Bosworth Toller is probably not to be done without considering the fact that there are probably plenty of words in there that they've only worked out what they mean by looking at this and working it out from context. So it's like kind of like tautological.
Yeah.
But yeah, so from there up quickly, this word wedera, which seems to be a just another word for the Geats, maybe. On land stepped, seaward restrained, so they kind of restrained, like they moored the boat. Shirts shook, wore garments. So I suppose like their armor rattled around or shook. God they thanked, so they thanked God for the fact that the wave road, the sea, had been easy on them. Then from the wall, they saw the ward of the Scyldings.
Or does he see them?
Oh, yeah, it doesn't give a... Oh, yeah, no, it does actually. Yeah, no, you're right.
Because the relative also applies to him, right?
Yeah, you're right. So the ward of the Scyldings, he who sea cliffs must guard or should guard, or like whose job it was to guard the cliffs. Born over the gangway of the ship is how I've translated Balcom.
Well, I think it's what he's still seeing, right? He sees them kind of implied bear the bright shields, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think I got confused here. And then like war equipment, eager, like ready, false legal. Him curiosity broke like thoughts of his spirit. So curiosity broke the thoughts of his spirit, maybe. What these men were. So he was curious about what these men were. And then he went to the shore riding his horse, or riding on his horse. The Thane of Hrothgar, if you've forgotten, just to clarify who he is. He violently, or I don't know if violently is maybe too strong, like powerfully aggressively shook the strength wood, the side of the ship, I suppose. And then,
or his spear.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, I think one of the translations in Bosworth Toller is shaft, so that makes sense. Actually, yeah, that makes more sense actually. And then he asks with Meðalwordum, which I've translated as council words. I think some translations have it as like formal language, like formal words. So he went to the shore riding his horse. He shook the spear, as Jackson suggests, and then he asked with like kind of formal words, "What are you, armor wearers?" Or you could even translate that as thing havers, like thing havers. Like I feel like that's kind of ambiguous. But then he says mail bound, who come over the sea led by your tall keel, like here over the sea, is how I've translated that. Like with your keel leading you. This is one where I think different translations differ on what the pronoun they use is. Because I have ich was in the sata. I think some have here. So I think the original has ich. I could be wrong, but I think maybe the reason some have here is because it suddenly jumps to the past tense. So it's almost as if the narrator is saying this guy was the protector of the coast. I don't know what you think about that.
The manuscript has nothing. It goes hider over homas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's a word missing that ended in le, and then probably a pronoun subject. I think itch is reasonable, given the context.
Okay. So I was coast protector. I held water watch. I held watch over the water, so that on Danish land, enemies or hated ones that had navies couldn't do any harm. Like they couldn't hurt people on Danish land. So this, not here, more obviously to come began. So I put a slightly more cohesive translation underneath of this one, just because otherwise I probably wouldn't have been able to do it on the fly. But I've given it as, you shield bearers didn't set out to come here more obviously or plainly, and you definitely don't know the kinsman's password or have their consent to be here. I think I might have taken a few liberties there. I didn't quite know how to translate that one.
I guess never hear like more openly maybe.
Mm.
Did shield havers come? The Ongunon,
Okay.
I don't know if you need to do anything with the Ongunon.
So this is the most openly that shield bearers have ever come here, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, began to come, but like the began feels like it's there to fill up the meter. I think
Yeah.
that's also in the commentary area.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've never seen a greater earl or hero or something like that on Earth than is your sum, is how I've glossed that. So I suppose that's like maybe than what you are. Never seen a greater hero than you are.
But I think it's just one of you, right? Some heir or someone of yours.
Okay.
One
Okay.
Yeah. That's how I would say that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then it says, what did it say? Warrior in armor. Not is that man in Lord's Hall is how Bosworth Toller has Seldguma, I think. Of like to weapons worthy. So I took this to mean something like this isn't just a man of the Lord's Hall that's made worthy because he has weapons, unless your appearance deceives me. Well, it doesn't say me, but like unless your appearance is deceiving. And then he says unique appearance. I don't know if that's supposed to be an insult or not. I don't know.
So it's like that is not that's no like royal retainer or whatever, right? Seldguma. That is no royal retainer adorned with weapons. I think there's actually differences. Let's see, 250. The manuscript says never. Kleber and some editors have Navna.
Yeah, I have Navna.
Interesting. I mean, like never could kind of make some sense. Like unless, never unless his appearance may belie him. Or maybe he is belied by his appearance, by his unique appearance. But I think English Onsen has to be nominative, right? So
yeah, I took that as a kind of, how is it written in the yeah, I took it as a kind of addendum that was shoved in, but maybe not actually. Because unseen means the same thing as Lita pretty much, doesn't it? Like appearance.
Yeah, face, appearance, countenance, yeah. I mean, the gist, I think we can pretty confidently say is like, if I'm not deceived by his appearance, that's a kingly retainer. I almost wonder if what's misleading us is like there shouldn't be a niz. Maybe it should be is. That is, right, a royal retainer unless
I'm deceived.
Yeah, unless his appearance deceives me.
Yeah.
Retainer honored with weapons.
I believe. Yeah.
I wonder if that's actually what's going on. If maybe I'm missing something, but I just wonder if that the N on Niz should just needs to be cut.
I just think because it says Wabnum Uerlath, I just kind of, I feel like I read that as weapons worthied, so like made worthy just because he has weapons, but that might be reading too much into it.
Lucaneer says that Folk suggests that is no mere man of the hall.
Okay.
He's taking it as a less honorific term.
Right.
Like that's no mere guy who hangs out at the hall, doesn't go and do stuff. Decorated with weapons, unless
his appearance, his unique appearance, deceives you. That also kind of makes sense. I guess it depends on if you're taking Seldgum as good or bad. To me, it sounds good, but it could be that it's the guy who just hangs out, like as Adrian says, the coal biter, right?
Like the armchair man that doesn't go out. That sounds reasonable to me.
So two possibilities there, depending on whether it's good or bad to be a Seldgum.
Yeah. So now I must, now I your must frumkin, like lineage, or like background, family background maybe, or you could even say ethnic background, but I feel like then if you translate anything as that, then people kind of jump on it and
Origin?
use it as a sinister. Yeah, origin could be good. So now I have to learn your origin, or your like, actually origin seems pretty good. Before you, I've said before you lying spies get further onto Danish land, but I feel like maybe it's a bit strong for him to be openly accusing them of being lying spies. Shall with us. That was no Lause shall with us.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem strong, but it does seem like what it says, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that's what I'd go with. I feel like this line sounds pithy in Old English, but I can't find a way of making it sound pithy in modern English. Now, you people that come, like you far dwellers, you people that come from afar, sea travellers, hear my onefold thought. Speed is best to make known from where your comings are. So you could translate that as like, I'm going to say one thing, you better tell me where you come from quickly, you know, like, but it just never sounds as pithy in modern English as it does in Old English, but it's like kind of just threatening, like, it sounds to me anyway.
Well, that's the prologue in 3 fits.
It is.
Beowulf's name has still not been said.
No.
So Simon, we're meeting up tomorrow to do the next 8 fits?
I was thinking sort of 2-hour break and then the next 8 fits.
Okay, great. This worked out pretty well because I have to go in a few minutes. That was, I thought, really interesting. I got a great amount out of that, and I think we'll continue to. Were we talking about maybe doing these monthly-ish? Was that kind of your idea?
Monthly sounds all right, because I feel like then we'd be done. Bearing in mind there'll probably be a couple that we end up having to do them at a more than a month interval. That finishes us pretty much at the end of the year, I think.
Yeah, that was the original idea behind dividing it into 4 fits at a time.
Yeah, so I think I'd be up for that.
All right.
If any time of day is easier for you, I'm happy to just stay up late or wake up early or something. If there's any time that would be better, because I realise it's just your whole afternoon has now been consumed.
Well, I've got to go drive through a bunch of snow, so that's probably going to consume a little bit of it too. But this was a lot of fun. Very for me. Let's work on scheduling the next one, and this time of day is fine on a weekend.
Okay.
What time is it for you right now? It's pretty late, right?
It's 11:30, but
it's pretty late.
I don't mind. It's all right. On a week anyway, I don't have to really do anything tomorrow morning.
All right. Well, let's probably do it roughly this time again, mid-February.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, sir.
Thank you everyone for watching, and thank you very much, Jackson, for your time.
Hey, thanks everyone, and all the best to you all, and we'll see you in February.
See you very soon.